I paid their damn mortgage for years. Then they used my name, without asking, to lease my brother a Porsche. So I shut the account. Let them figure it out. I still remember that morning like it had just happened yesterday. It was a quiet Monday in February, the kind where Portland wears a thin gray veil, and everything feels like it's waiting for spring to show up. Rain drizzled softly outside my window, and I had just poured my first cup of coffee. I had my laptop open on the kitchen table, half reading a client's W-2, half watching steam rise from the cup. That's when my phone rang. Ms. Elara Morton, this is Angela from Everlight Credit Union. I just need to verify a few details with you regarding your new auto lease. I blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what auto lease? The 2023 Porsche Cayenne, ma'am. The lease application came through 2 days ago. Just confirming if you'd like to proceed with pickup at Lux Drive Motors this week? I remember going completely still. My brain split into two halves. One part tried to find some logical explanation. Maybe it was a scam, a mistake, maybe someone typed the wrong name. The other part, the part that already knew. That part dropped its shoulders and whispered, Of course! Of course it's them! I asked her to hold, logged into my Everlight account, and there it was, pending under my name, my credit, my address. The paperwork had been processed with a power of attorney form, signed by my mother, Dolores Morton, my mother, the same woman I'd been paying mortgage for the past 3 years since Dad died, the same woman who said she didn't want to burden me, but somehow never hesitated to remind me when the electric bill was overdue. And Trent, my younger brother. He was the only one in the family who ever wanted a Porsche. He'd been talking about it since high school, back when he didn't have a license, and still thought making beats in his bedroom would lead to a record deal. They had done this without telling me, without even asking. I hung up politely, promised I'd look into it, then just sat there. The silence in my apartment suddenly felt heavier than usual. I'd moved into this one bedroom last fall, after finally convincing myself it was okay to stop living in my childhood home. Okay to leave the people I'd been trying to carry on my back since I was old enough to write checks. I used to tell myself I stayed for them. For Mom, mostly. After Dad died, she seemed to shrink. Her voice thinner, her hands trembling when she stirred sugar into her tea. And Trent. Well, Trent always needed something. Rent, rides, repairs, bail once. I stepped in every time, no questions. Because that's what big sisters do, right? That's what daughters do. But this was different. This was crossing a line. Not just asking for help, but assuming it. Taking it. Signing my name like it belonged to them. I stared at the floor, trying to slow the pounding in my chest. I thought about the mortgage, how I'd paid it every month, on time, even when it meant skipping things for myself. No one ever said thank you. It was just expected. Last Thanksgiving, when I brought it up, just gently, just to mention how tight things had been, Mom had looked at me like I'd insulted her. You're the one who offered, Elara, she'd said. Don't act like you're some kind of martyr. Trent just kept scrolling on his phone. Now they had the audacity to use my name, my credit, to lease a luxury car I didn't even know about, and no one thought I deserved a call? I kept thinking, if this were reversed, if I had used Trent's name for a credit card without asking, hell would have broken loose. But when it's me, it's fine. I'm the responsible one, the dependable one, the one they know won't explode. Because I never have. Because I've always stayed quiet. I stood up, poured the rest of my coffee into the sink. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from anger. At least not the kind that boils over. It was something colder. A long, slow freeze spreading across everything I used to believe about my family. I didn't call Mom. I didn't call Trent. I didn't scream or send texts in all caps. I just sat back down and opened my spreadsheet. The one where I tracked every expense I'd ever covered for them. Mortgage, groceries, utility bills, a new water heater, Trent's lawyer when he got into that mess with the landlord. It added up. Quietly. Like interest. And for the first time, I didn't feel noble. I didn't feel generous. I felt used. I closed the laptop, looked around the apartment I was finally learning to love, the soft yellow lamp in the corner, my peace lily by the window, the coffee ring I hadn't wiped off the table. I had poured a decade of my life into keeping a home I wasn't allowed to own, into holding up a family that didn't hold me back. And now, they'd signed my name like it was theirs. I set my mug down and whispered to the quiet room. I think I finally get it. This wasn't about a car. It never was. It was about what they thought I was worth, and how little they thought I'd ever say no. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, even though I hadn't slept much. My body felt heavy, like I'd been carrying something invisible in my sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor for what felt like 20 minutes. Not thinking, just holding everything in place. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I could feel the weight of it behind my eyes, pressing gently. The kind of grief that doesn't scream. It just sits with you, quiet and patient, like it knows it's going to be around for a while. I went through the motions: coffee, brushing my teeth, feeding the neighbor's cat who liked to slip in through my open kitchen window. But I wasn't really present. Everything felt numb. Later that day, while going through some paperwork, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in a while. Inside were funeral receipts, from when Dad passed, cemetery fees, catering, printing the service programs. I paid for all of it. No one even asked me to. There was just no one else who could or would. I remember Mom saying, "Trent can't handle this. Funerals are too emotional for him." So he flew back to LA the morning after the wake, didn't even stay for the burial. At the time, I understood. I always tried to understand. I thought, if I keep the peace, everything will stay intact. But now, looking at those papers, something shifted. I wasn't sad. I was tired. Tired of carrying the emotional weight for people who couldn't be bothered to lift a corner. Around 3 p.m., I got a text from Nadine. "Still at Maple and Steam every Wednesday? I could use a break from taxes and ex-husbands." I replied, 4 o'clock, same table. Nadine had been my coworker at Brightwell years ago. She left when her divorce finalized, moved to the coast for a while, then came back and started freelance tax consulting. She was sharp, funny, and never sugarcoated anything, not even her own mistakes. That's probably why I liked her. By the time I got to the cafe, the usual drizzle had picked up. The place smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso, just like it always did. Nadine was already there, flipping through a legal pad filled with numbers. "You look like someone who just found out their dog has been filing taxes in their name," she said, looking over her glasses. I smiled weakly. "Worse." She closed the pad. "Okay, spill it." I hesitated. Then I told her. Everything. The mortgage, the Porsche, the power of attorney signed behind my back. She listened, arms crossed, eyes locked on mine, like she was reading subtitles under my face. When I finished, she leaned back and shook her head. "Damn. That's not ignorance, Alara. That's strategy." "What do you mean?" "I mean, they knew you'd never fight them. You've taught them that. So they don't ask anymore. They just take. It's not a mistake. It's a system." I sat with that for a minute. A system. I'd been part of it my whole life. Then she added, almost offhandedly, "You know, I heard something a while back. Someone who works at LuxDrive said your brother told them, 'Don't worry, my sister's covering the payments. Just push the paperwork through.' Like it was a done deal." My stomach tightened. "So he planned this," she nodded. "Sounds like it." I looked out the window. A couple walked by under a giant plaid umbrella, laughing at something. The world didn't stop just because mine tilted. Nadine took a sip of her tea, then said quietly, "You're not a walking wallet, Ilara. You're a person. And kindness isn't free. It costs something. Especially when the people around you treat it like a bottomless well." "I thought I was doing the right thing," I said. "I just wanted them to be okay." There's a difference between helping someone stand up and dragging them on your back while they pretend to be tired. That one hit deep. I didn't say anything after that. She didn't push. We just sat there, two women in our 50s, watching the rain slide down the glass like it had somewhere better to be. Later, as we were packing up, she said, "You know what's harder than walking away from a toxic family dynamic?" "What?" "Realizing you've been keeping it alive out of guilt." I nodded, more to myself than to her. I wasn't ready to act yet, but something inside had cracked. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward letting the light in. I don't know what I expected when I drove over to the house that evening. Maybe I thought there'd be an apology waiting by the front door. Maybe some kind of misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a few calm words. I parked in the same spot I'd used for years, right by the mailbox, and sat there for a moment with the engine off, hands still on the wheel. The porch light was on. The siding needed painting, same as it had for the past 4 summers. I'd offered once, but Mom had said, "No need." Trent said he'll get to it. He never did. I took a breath, then walked in without knocking. Habit. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove like nothing had happened. She turned and gave me that familiar half-smile she used when she knew I was upset, but didn't want to talk about it yet. "I made stew," she said. Like that could fix what was broken. I leaned against the counter. "Did you sign a power of attorney form to lease a Porsche under my name?" She didn't look up, just stirred. "I thought it would be easier that way." "Easier for who?" "I didn't want to bother you. I figured you'd help like always." I blinked, then laughed, sharp, almost bitter. "You didn't want to bother me, so you signed my name?" "I didn't forge anything," she snapped. "It was legal. You gave me power of attorney years ago when your dad got sick. I just used it." "That was for medical emergencies, Mom, not luxury cars." She finally looked at me then. "Trent needed a reliable car. You know how hard it's been for him to keep a job without one. It's not like he asked for a Porsche. The dealership said it was the only thing left on the lot." I let that sink in. "So you're saying it wasn't his choice? He was just forced into a top-tier SUV?" Mom's voice rose. "Don't twist my words, Alara. Why are you making this such a big deal? You act like we're strangers. You've always helped your family. You've always been the responsible one. And that gives you the right to make financial decisions in my name?" "It's just a car. Stop acting like we emptied your bank account." My jaw clenched. "No, it's not just a car. It's trust, and you broke it." We stood there in silence, the stew bubbling behind her, like it didn't know it was boiling in the middle of a storm. She turned back to the stove. "You're overreacting." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just walked out. Later that night, I got a text from Trent. "Thanks for making things harder. Mom's stressed out now. Hope you're happy." As if that was the whole story. As if I hadn't paid mortgage for 3 years, covered utilities, patched holes they didn't even notice. As if my name was just a formality they had the right to borrow when convenient. An hour later, my Aunt Louise called. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. "Ilara," she said, dragging the word out like a sigh. "I heard what happened. Honey, you really ought to let this go. Family's family. You know that." "I'm not cutting anyone off," I said quietly. "I just want to be respected." "Come on now," she chuckled. "You're not married, no kids. What's all that money for? You don't have anyone to leave it to." That stopped me cold. I was silent for a long beat, then said, "That doesn't mean I owe it to anyone, Aunt Louise." She clicked her tongue. "Don't let pride make you cold, baby." We said our goodbyes, but it hung there. The assumption that I should give because I could. Because I didn't have a husband to object or kids to protect. That being a single woman in her 50s meant my resources were fair game for anyone who called me family. I sat at my desk that night, opened my budgeting spreadsheet, and stared at the numbers. Not the bank numbers, but a new tab I'd created. Family support. Mortgage payments. Itemized. Repairs. Groceries. 1,000 here, 1,000 there. Over $84,000 in total. 84,000. I stared at the total for a long time. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the story it told. A story where my care had been mistaken for duty, my generosity twisted into a kind of invisible tax. I realized then, kindness, when expected instead of appreciated, stops being kindness. It becomes currency. And somehow, in the family ledger, I wasn't listed as someone who gave. I was just the person they assumed would always pay. The envelope was thin and plain, one of those standard white ones with the blue Everlight Credit Union logo stamped neatly in the top corner. It looked harmless enough, sitting there between the water bill and a flyer for discounted pest control. I almost didn't open it. Inside was a notice of overdue payment. Past due. Vehicle insurance policy. 2023 Porsche Cayenne policyholder. Ilara Morton. I stood in the kitchen, letter trembling in my hand. There it was again. My name tied to a decision I never made. I'd never signed up for a policy. I didn't even own a vehicle anymore. The old Subaru was long gone. I took the bus, or walked these days. That was enough for me. I called Everlight, waited through 4 minutes of hold music, then got transferred to someone in their auto department. She was polite, asked me to verify my address and date of birth. Yes, I said. That's me. But I never opened this policy. I don't own this car. She clicked on her keyboard for a while. Well, Ms. Morton, she finally said, the system shows the insurance was activated using a previous account number linked to you. It's the same ID and address on your 2019 Subaru. Seems the dealership pulled it from existing records. My stomach dropped. And who requested it? I asked. Pause. Looks like the co-signer was a Mr. Trent Morton, of course. I hung up, sat down on the couch, and stared at the floor. The letter was still in my hand, creased now from where my fingers had clenched around it. So now my name wasn't just on the lease, it was on the insurance, which meant if I didn't pay, it would ding my credit. Again. I kept telling myself not to panic, that I could fix it, that I always fixed it. But something in me was starting to break. Quietly, beneath the surface. I pulled my knees up to my chest, curled into the corner of the couch, and whispered out loud to no one. What if this doesn't stop? What if they never stop? Because I knew the answer. They wouldn't. Not unless I did. I spent the rest of the day spiraling through options. I could pay the bill, again. I could dispute it and risk the process dragging out for months. I could confront them, again, and be called dramatic, ungrateful, cold. It felt like standing at a fork in the road with a sign that read, "Pick your poison." I didn't want to be the angry one. I didn't want the family fallout. I didn't want another shouting match in Mom's kitchen, or a voicemail from Trent dripping with guilt-tripping sarcasm. But I also didn't want to be invisible anymore. That night, Nadine texted, "Got room for one more at dinner tomorrow?" Just a few friends, all survivors of messy families. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. The next evening, her house smelled like rosemary and baked garlic. The lights were soft. The table was already set. There were 4 of us, me, Nadine, and 2 other women. One was a retired teacher named Carol. The other was a hospice nurse named Janelle. Both in their 60s. Both with eyes that had seen too much and still stayed kind. Over chicken with lemon and potatoes, they told stories. About grown children who stopped calling, brothers who only appeared when money was involved, parents who used silence as punishment. Janelle said something that stayed with me. I lost most of my family when I finally told them no, but I stopped losing myself after that. And honestly, that was the better trade. I didn't speak much that night, just listened, nodding when the words hit too close to home, and I felt like I could breathe. Like maybe I wasn't the only one who'd been told to smile while carrying someone else's weight. When the night ended, Nadine hugged me tight at the door. "You don't owe anyone your peace," she said. "Not even your mother, especially not your brother." On the drive home, I kept thinking about what Janelle said, about what it meant to stop losing yourself. I'd been giving pieces of me away for years, thinking I was being generous, thinking it made me good. Noble even. But lately, it just made me tired. And sitting alone in my apartment, I realized something I hadn't said out loud yet. I didn't want to keep paying for things that looked like love, but felt like control. I sat at the kitchen table, the blue light of my laptop casting soft shadows across the room. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Outside, the street lamp flickered the way it always did when it rained, and the soft hum of the fridge was the only sound besides my shallow breathing. My credit report was open on the screen. A soft red flag marked the overdue payment on the Porsche lease and now the insurance. My score hadn't dropped yet, but it would, and soon. In the past, I would have already transferred the money, called the bank, smoothed it all over. I was good at that, solving problems I didn't cause, keeping the boat from rocking, even if I had to throw myself overboard to do it. But this time, I didn't move. I stared at the numbers until they blurred, then pulled out a notepad and pen. I wrote down every dollar I'd spent on my family in the last 5 years. Not just mortgage payments, but groceries, medical bills, replacing the furnace, helping Trent with rent when he got fired again, gas money when Mom refused to drive at night, Christmas gifts, grocery store runs, pet food, cell phone bills, legal fees. When I added it all up, the number sat there like a stone at the bottom of a pond. $84,162.41. I had never totaled it before. Never even thought to. It always felt like the right thing to do. Like what a daughter was supposed to do. What a sister should do. I stared at the number, let it burn into my eyes. I had been paying off a debt I never agreed to. A debt that kept getting bigger. Not because of the money, but because of the silence wrapped around it. That night, I opened a blank email and addressed it to Everlight Credit Union. Hello, I am writing to formally dispute the auto lease and associated insurance policy under my name for a 2023 Porsche Cayenne. I did not authorize this lease, nor did I consent to the use of my credit or personal information. I request an immediate investigation and removal of this liability from my record. Sincerely, Alara Morton. I reread it 3 times. My finger hovered over the send button like it was a trigger, and then I clicked. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding like I just slammed a door that had been open for far too long. There was no celebration, no relief, just stillness, because I knew what came next. Mom would find out. She'd cry, maybe call my aunt first to vent. Trent would probably lose the car. Maybe he'd call me names. Maybe he wouldn't call at all. But I couldn't carry this anymore. I couldn't let fear of their disappointment keep me trapped in this loop. I had given up too many years, too many pieces of myself, just to keep being seen as the good one. I closed the laptop and leaned back, letting the quiet wrap around me like a cold blanket. I looked over at the little orchid I'd brought home from the store last weekend. It was still blooming, still upright. I'd forgotten to water it the day before, but it didn't seem to hold it against me. That's when I heard it again. His voice, like a whisper from years ago. Dad. We were in the hospital then. He was thin and tired, hooked up to more machines than I could count. I was refilling his water cup when he reached out and grabbed my hand. Ilara, he'd said, voice rough. I'm sorry we let it all fall on you. I should have done more. I should have told your mom to back off Trent and stop expecting you to pick up the slack. You deserved better than that. I had told him it was okay. And I'd meant it back then. Because that's what I did. I forgave, I swallowed it, I carried on. But now, sitting there years later, I realized it wasn't about it being okay or not. It was about me finally believing I didn't have to keep paying for everyone else's comfort with my own exhaustion. That maybe it was okay to let some things fall if it meant I could finally stand on my own. I made myself a cup of tea, just chamomile and honey, sat on the couch and wrapped a throw blanket around my shoulders. The world outside kept spinning. Cars passed by. Someone upstairs was vacuuming. But I was still. That night, I didn't sleep much. But it wasn't the old kind of restlessness. It wasn't fear or guilt or trying to plan the next fix. It happened on a Thursday morning, just before lunch. I was sitting at my desk at Brightwell, reviewing a small business client's quarterly report, when I heard the receptionist's voice echo down the hallway. Alara! Um, there's someone here to see you. The pause in her voice said everything. I stood, straightened my sweater, and walked to the front lobby. There, standing just inside the glass doors, was my mother, Dolores Morton, in her beige cardigan and pressed slacks, with her purse clenched tightly against her side like it might escape. She looked smaller than usual, but her eyes were sharp, fixed on me like I owed her something. Ilara, she said, her voice tight but clear. Can we talk? I could already feel the heat rising in my neck. I glanced at Susan, the receptionist, who was pretending not to listen as she rearranged the mail pile. I could see her hands slow down slightly, just enough to catch every word. Let's go outside, I said, already dreading what was coming. We stepped into the parking lot, the February wind catching the edge of her coat. The sky above us was flat and gray, the kind that made everything feel a little more hollow. She turned to face me, her voice already trembling with controlled rage. Did you really call the bank? Did you actually report the lease? Yes, I said quietly. Her face twisted. You've ruined your brother's credit. Do you even realize what you've done? I protected mine, I replied. It should never have been under my name to begin with. Your brother needs that car for work. He didn't have work when he leased it, I said, and he didn't ask. Neither did you. She shook her head. I thought you were better than this. Thought you cared more about this family than some numbers on a piece of paper. I took a breath, slow and steady. I do care, but I also care about myself, and I'm done being used. Her lips pressed into a hard line. You've changed. No, Mom. I just stopped pretending I didn't matter. She stared at me, the wind tugging at her hair. For a second, her face softened, like she might say something real. But it passed. I've already lost your father, she said, her voice cracking. And now I'm losing you too? I didn't answer, because I didn't know how to say, you never really had me, not the real me. We stood in silence for a few seconds. A bird darted across the parking lot, startling us both. Somewhere inside, the office phone began ringing again. I almost used that as an excuse to leave, but she had already turned and walked away, arms crossed, back straight. No hug, no apology, no goodbye. When I walked back into the office, Susan gave me a sympathetic look, but didn't say a word. I appreciated that more than she knew. I sat at my desk, opened the spreadsheet I had been working on earlier, and stared at it without seeing a single number. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Louise. You made your mother's blood pressure spike. She hasn't eaten all day. Are you happy now? I stared at the message, rereading it 3 times. Then I put the phone down without replying. I didn't even feel angry, just tired. Around midnight, another message came in, this time from Trent. Well, you did it. Car's gone. Hope you're proud. You win, Alara. That one made me laugh a little, bitter and low. You win! Like this had been a game, like I'd been keeping score, as if I wanted any of this. I didn't respond to him either. I got up, made tea, curled up on the couch, and let myself cry. Not the frantic, gasping kind of crying I used to do in the shower. This was different, slower, quieter, like water leaking from a crack in a wall that had been patched too many times. I cried for the version of me that tried so hard to be what everyone needed. The girl who thought love was earned through usefulness. The woman who never asked for anything in return, only to be told she was selfish the moment she did. I cried for the weight I had carried for so long, without even realizing how heavy it had become. For the holidays spent organizing, cooking, paying for everything while being told I was too serious, too controlling. I cried until the kettle whistled and the walls of my apartment stopped feeling like a cage and started feeling like shelter. Nadine's house smelled like roasted garlic and thyme, the kind of warm, earthy scent that wrapped around you the moment you walked in. It wasn't a showy kind of welcoming. It was the kind that made you exhale without realizing you'd been holding your breath. The kind that told your bones, "You're safe here." Her dining room was cozy and a little cluttered in the best way. The oak table, worn smooth from years of elbows and laughter, sat beneath a string of mismatched bulbs that gave off a soft amber glow. There were 5 chairs, none of them the same height or shape, and a sixth tucked off in the corner, just in case, Nadine had said. The walls held crooked frames of family recipes, old concert posters, and a single photo of her with her arms around 2 people I didn't recognize but instinctively trusted. There were 5 of us that night: me, Nadine, and 3 others. Carol, a retired school librarian with silver curls and a voice that could hush a room without trying. Sam, who worked maintenance at the city college and wore his grief like a coat, quiet but always there. And Janelle, a hospice nurse with warm eyes and hands that looked like they'd held both miracles and farewells. Everyone was in their 50s or 60s. Everyone carried stories you couldn't see, the kind of weight people usually try to hide. But no one here bothered with pretending. Nobody asked me to talk. Nobody leaned in with that quiet pity I'd gotten used to. They just passed the wine, scooped generous helpings of food onto my plate, and let the conversation drift in like waves. Unforced, unhurried. "I didn't talk to my mother for 8 years," Carol said after we'd clinked glasses. "Not because I didn't love her, but because loving her was killing me." Sam gave a dry laugh, eyes on his mashed potatoes. "My dad used to say family first, while handing me bills he couldn't pay. After a while, that phrase stopped sounding noble. Started sounding like a threat." Janelle leaned back, swirling her drink. "I thought I was the problem for most of my life. Turns out, I was just the only one willing to say no." I didn't say much, just listened. Their stories weren't exactly like mine, but the echoes were all too familiar. The invisible roles we got assigned, the guilt that wrapped itself around every boundary we tried to set, the love that always came with terms and conditions. And yet here we were, 5 strangers bound by the courage to stop playing the parts we'd been cast in. I smiled more than once that night, even laughed. But it wasn't a performative laugh, the kind you give to be polite or make others feel comfortable. This one came from a different place, a place I hadn't accessed in a long time, a place not built on duty. After dessert, peach cobbler with way too much cinnamon, exactly how I like it, we stayed at the table. No one rushed to clear the plates. No one checked their phones. There was a comfort in the mess, in the crumbs, and the empty glasses, and the pauses between stories. Nadine leaned over, tapped her glass gently with a fork. "Can I just say," she said, glancing around, "how damn good it feels to eat with people who don't expect anything from me except my appetite." We all laughed, and something in my chest gave way. Like a knot that had been there so long, I'd forgotten it didn't belong. That's when it hit me. I had spent most of my life being the glue, the fixer, the one who made sure the cracks didn't become canyons. But the truth was, I'd been holding together a version of family that only existed if I kept sacrificing myself. Sitting at that table, surrounded by people who didn't need saving, I felt more seen than I ever had in my own mother's kitchen. Maybe I had lost something when I walked away from my mother and brother, but maybe, just maybe, I'd made space for something better, something real. That night, when I got home, I put on my pajamas, lit a candle, and sat at my desk. I opened the banking app. There it was. The account I'd used to pay the mortgage all those years. The one Mom still assumed was ready to go, just in case. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I clicked close. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I didn't write a dramatic goodbye in the memo line. I just closed it. Then I opened a blank email. To Dolores Morton, Trent Morton, subject. For the record, I hope you're both well. This is just to say that from this point forward, I won't be contributing financially or otherwise to the house, the car, or any shared expenses. I wish you both peace. but I can't continue to live inside the role you've written for me. From today on, I'm choosing my own story. Ilara, I hit send, sat back, and breathed. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I didn't feel cruel, or cold, or heartless. I felt whole. A few weeks passed after that dinner at Nadine's, and somewhere in the quiet of those days, I started to feel like a real person again. Life didn't suddenly turn magical. I still had deadlines, laundry, the occasional cracked egg in the carton, but something had shifted. The apartment that once felt like a transition space now felt like mine. Fully. Soft light through the living room windows in the late afternoons. A plant I bought on impulse. A white orchid that somehow thrived on the sill, even though I had no idea what I was doing. I slept in on Saturday mornings. 8 a.m. felt like a revolution. I made eggs slow, brewed coffee the old-fashioned way, sat at the table without my phone. I started reading again. Not anything profound. Mostly novels where no one owed anyone anything. That alone felt healing. One afternoon, I stood barefoot on the tiny balcony, cup of tea in hand, watching the late winter sun hit the side of the neighboring building. There was nothing extraordinary about it, but it was mine, my moment, my air, my space, and I thought, without drama or bitterness, so this is what it feels like when no one expects you to save them. Not a demand in sight, not a guilt trip voicemail waiting. Just me, and a sky I didn't have to explain myself to. Mom hadn't called. I'd heard through someone at church that she was fine. A little tired, they said. Maybe not her usual self, but she's managing. I wrote her a letter once, started it twice, folded it, unfolded it, then finally threw it away. I didn't need to send it, not really. Because if the only reason I reached out was guilt, not love, then it wasn't a bridge. It was a leash. One afternoon at Maple and Steam, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in over a year. Julia, one of my old tax clients. She was carrying a baby on her hip and looking absolutely frazzled, like she'd sprinted through a windstorm and landed in line behind me. She recognized me first. Ilara? Oh my God, I was hoping I'd see you. I don't know what I'm doing. I have all these forms and no clue what half of them mean. I'm terrified of messing something up and getting audited. I smiled gently. You want to grab a seat? We took the table by the window. She laid out a crumpled folder and a handful of receipts like she was confessing to a crime. I took one look and said, "Okay, this is totally doable." Deep breath. She did. And then her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Seriously, you have no idea what this means." But I did. I really did. Helping her didn't feel like a chore or a duty. It wasn't a performance or proof of love. It was a choice. Mine. I helped because I wanted to, not because someone assumed I would. And that, somehow, made all the difference. Later that night, I sat down with my notebook. The same one I used to track every family payment, every bill, every loan I never got back. The notebook had always felt heavy, like a ledger of silent debts. But now, on a clean page near the back, I wrote something simple. I don't owe anyone for the love I gave, and I don't owe myself to anyone who can't see me. Then, just below it, in smaller handwriting, I don't owe my past. I only answer to my peace. I closed the book and walked to the window. Opened it just a little. The breeze rolled in, soft and clean. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of tea and stood there for a while, holding it between my palms. I used to believe family meant staying, no matter how much it cost you. I thought love was measured by how much you could swallow, how much of yourself you could cut away without bleeding too obviously. But now I think real family is whoever lets you be whole. No trimming, no shrinking, no script. I walked to the table, set my cup down, and opened a blank page. This time, not for tracking expenses, but just to write. A reminder, a truth. I don't owe anyone. Not even the version of me who didn't know that yet. Maybe you've been there too, trying so hard to hold a family together, even when the weight of it slowly pulls you apart. Maybe you've felt that quiet ache of being needed, but never truly seen. And if you have, I just want to say you're not alone. We don't always get to choose where we come from, but we can choose where we go from here. And sometimes, choosing yourself isn't walking away, it's finally coming home. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll stay with me. There are more stories to tell, and who knows, maybe one of them will feel a little bit like yours. Until then, take gentle care of your heart. You deserve that much.